Hello and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering EDH deck tech idea. Today we are taking a look at an old school double-sided commander, so stay tuned as we talk about Extus, Oriq Overlord, and its sorcery backside, Awaken the Blood Avatar. But before we jump into today's video, I want to make a shout out for Mythatom. Check out their high quality Magic the Gathering and other fantasy products via the link in the notes below and use my discount code LATSEL for 10% off your order. I gotta say that I'm pretty sure that you can build a very cool Mardu control list with this commander featuring its front side, as you can loop a bunch of Edict creatures over and over again. But Awaken the Blood Avatar is also a sorcery edict, which brings along a powerful creature that will serve as one of your win cons. This is why in this video I am featuring the sorcery backside mostly. As we are in Mardu colors, we got a bunch of effects that will synergize nicely with discounting the sorcery costs simply by producing a bunch of tokens which we can sacrifice to discount the sorcery side, and along the way we will use drain synergies to drain our opponents down along the way and also go for a token beatdown approach. For all of this to work, we need token generation, which is why we play a few of the following cards. But you can be sure that there are way more token generators in this deck. A few that I want to highlight are, for example, Charismatic Conqueror. This is an extremely powerful 2-drop, simply because he either works as a stacks piece for your opponents or brings you even further ahead in your game plan by creating tokens, if your opponents don't want to fall behind in tempo. Extus came with the Strixhaven set, just as Sedgemoor Witch. I'm a big fan of these pest tokens that Sedgemoor Witch can create, and also the inbit ward is always a nice thing to have. Those tokens will help you to stabilize your life total and, along the way, also discount your sorcery side. Another really good 2-drop is Young Pyromancer, especially it being a non-token red creature will be relevant later. An alternative win con, aside from the sorcery side, is Monastery Mentor. This card has been feared in Standard, and I believe it was also quite powerful back in the days when it was played in Modern. At least, I believe so, but those prowess tokens are really strong, and as we also got a bunch of instant and sorceries that we are about to cast, this card fits nicely into what we want to do. I am personally a big fan of Sram's expertise in this deck. You will create free tokens, which will serve as a discounter, and along the way you can also bring yourself ahead with that free spell, even though if you're just casting one of your mana rocks with this one. One of my most recently favored cards when it comes to token generation is Aligned Heart. This really cool enchantment from the Tarkir Dragonstorm precons is catching my eye over and over again. I haven't seen this one in any Extus list that I have looked at, but I think that this one really deserves a spot, especially if you're at the point where you play Extus at its front side and want to loop a few creatures. You will definitely end up casting a few spells in your turn, which will trigger Aligned Heart. As we are in Mardu colors and as we don't want to run out of gas, we play a few Carddraw engines, which will synergize nicely with our game plan. Starting off with one of our most reliant Carddraw engines, we play Enduring Innocence. This card is really hard to get rid of, simply because when it dies, it gets back to the battlefield as an enchantment. As we will also sacrifice a bunch of creatures and we will also force our opponents to with a bunch of edict spells, we play Morbid Opportunist. Sure, this one is limited to just once per turn, but we got a few instant speed sacrifice outlets, which we can sequence over the whole turn cycle to profit from Morbid Opportunist. A little bit worse than Enduring Innocence is Welcoming Vampire, but it's still good enough to play in this deck, simply because it can also be a blocker for flying creatures. An alternative win con is Caretaker's Talent. This card is feared in Standard, as it serves as a win con in the mono-white control deck. This card provides everything that you need. You will draw a bunch of cards with this one, you can create an additional token which can also trigger a card draw, and its final level also serves as a final overrun effect. When it comes to card draw, especially in decks that synergize nicely with sacrificing cards, we play Skull Clamp. A bunch of our tokens are 1/1 by their base stats, so this artifact turns into a 1 mana draw 2. As the Blood Avatar token that we are about to create has a power of 3, it won't trigger Enduring Innocence or Welcoming Vampire. But due to it being a token, it will trigger Tokasia's Welcome, which is another powerful card draw engine, especially in token decks. All of these cards are limited to once per turn, but if you sequence it right, you can trigger them over the course of a whole turn cycle. As I have said earlier, alternatively, we also want to ping and drain our opponents down. This is why we play cards like Impact Tremors. Especially in a token go white deck, this is a must include. The way stronger version than Impact Tremors is War Leader's Call. It has the same ping effect, but it's also an Anthem, which synergizes nicely, especially along the way of other Anthem enchantments. Let's talk about Drain. We play Bastion of Remembrance. It brings along a token which we can use as sacrifice fodder, and it will also drain our opponents if creatures of ours die. As we want to go really wide, Elas Ilkor is a must include in the stack. It will stabilize our life total, and once we cast our sorcery, we will also get a bunch of death triggers from Elas Ilkor. This is also why we play Cruel Celebrant. And as you have seen in a bunch of token videos of mine, you always have to include Mirkwood Bats. This card is simply too strong, and especially in this Mardu strategy, it is extremely powerful. We will create a bunch of tokens, and we will also sacrifice them over and over again, which will lead to a bunch of Mirkwood Bat triggers. If you are scaling nicely into the middle to late game, these are a few bombs that I definitely had to include in this deck. Elena the Dusk Rose is definitely a huge threat in this deck. Sure, it will most likely be a one-time effect, but due to the fact that we sacrifice a bunch of tokens, she will accumulate a bunch of +1/+1 counters, then she can also stabilize us due to her having lifelink, and once we sacrificed her, we will be left with a huge army of creatures. As we are a token stack, we also have to play token doublers and triplers. This is why we want to warp in Exalted Sunborn. If we warp in Exalted Sunborn, we can create a bunch of tokens in one turn, and then in the best case, just for a few mana, cast our sorcery backside to create 2 of those blood avatars. At this point, we of course have to include Mondrag Glory Dominus. This also serves as an alternative sacrifice outlet, but we mostly care about its replacement effect of creating us even more tokens. If we want to go really over the top, we play Ojer Tak, Deepest Foundation. This token tripler is extremely pricey, yes it is, but if you're curving nicely and have the mana available, this can definitely turn the game in your favor. As we can also win with token beatdown, we play Teysa Karlov for all of those additional keywords, and in addition to that, we also double all of our death triggers for our drain synergies. When it comes to token creation, Talis, Reverend Medium, is always a card on my radar that I find really hard to put into a deck, but I think, especially in this one, with a few instant speed token generations, we can get a real high payoff of her every end step trigger. And if you want to win even more games, stay tuned, because you gotta play the following cards. We play Blood for the Blood God, a really cool card that really hits the theme here. Not only do we summon a bunch of blood avatars, but in addition to that, we can also discount this card and then cast it for cheap to refill our hand and deal a bunch of damage to our opponents. As we will discount the sorcery side over and over again and cast it from our command zone, we also want to play Fury Storm. I'm a huge fan of these type of cards, and especially in this deck where you can discount your commander spell by simply sacrificing even more creatures, which is exactly what this deck wants to do. Fury Storm feels like a perfect fit in this deck. You might remember from earlier that I talked about non-token red creatures. There aren't too many in this deck, but those that are inside this deck serve a purpose, because we also play Flare of Duplication. Once we did cast our sorcery, we will just hold priority, sacrifice Young Pyromancer for example into Flare of Duplication to cast it for free and copy our sorcery. And another really cool card that always serves a purpose, and especially this type of deck, we play Flamekin Herald. This card doesn't tend to see that much play simply because you don't want to cast your commander over and over again, but especially in this deck, you want to. And drawing even more free value from your sorcery spell makes Flamekin Herald a perfect fit for this deck, simply because it ain't too expensive mana-wise. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I will play in Extus. Let me know which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next. Make sure to check out my full deck list in the notes below, and then I would say, see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.